Something massive just shifted in the global energy game. A 56 billion nuclear plant deal with India has created shockwaves that are hitting every major power on the planet. And France, the nation that's dominated nuclear technology for decades, is watching in complete shock. This goes way beyond a simple business agreement. This is India making a bold statement that the future of global influence is heading east, and they're done asking for anyone's permission. They're constructing the type of energy foundation that completely changes how the world works. Energy drives everything in human civilization. Take it away and society collapses instantly. Manufacturing shuts down, digital systems crash, transport networks stop, medical equipment fails, global communications break down. What separates powerful nations from weak ones has always been their ability to control massive energy production. This truth never changes. And today, India just announced they're finished waiting for others to make the first move. They're done trailing behind established energy superpowers with this huge 56 billion nuclear commitment. They've ignited something that could transform their entire trajectory and delivered a powerful message worldwide. The age of energy dependence just ended. Here's what's really happening. This deal isn't about uranium and concrete and turbines. It's about ambition. It's about determination. It's about rejecting the idea that 1.4 billion people should stay stuck with power shortages, fuel imports, and failing electrical grids. For years, the global story stayed the same. Western nations controlled nuclear technology. They held the expertise, the patents, the financial control. Countries like India were supposed to purchase, not produce, to follow, not lead, to remain multiple steps behind. That entire system just crumbled. We're entering an era where energy goes beyond just electricity generation. It becomes geopolitical leverage. Nations that can produce abundant, clean, reliable, and scalable power gain the ability to dictate global economic terms. Nuclear energy stands as the only power source capable of delivering at this level. Solar has value. Wind plays a role. Hydro matters. But they remain scattered, weather-dependent, unreliable. Nuclear represents something completely different. It's constant base load power. It's an economic weapon. It's what drives advanced civilizations. You can't operate tomorrow's massive cities, AI processing centers, electric transportation systems, or multi-trillion-dollar economies using intermittent energy sources. You need the type of steady, unbreakable energy flow that nuclear delivers, and India gets this completely. That's why this deal carries such enormous weight. Those $56 billion aren't just a number. They're a signal. India saying, we're done being passive. We're done waiting for approval. We're done accepting limits. This is the same kind of massive leap nations make once every few generations, the type that transforms them from followers into leaders. What separates regional players from global superpowers isn't GDP growth or population size. It's whether you control your energy destiny. Look at the scale of India's situation. Their population isn't just huge. It's young, ambitious, and hungry for progress. Every single year, millions enter the job market. Millions more need housing, electricity, transportation, work, and internet access. You can't sustain over 1 billion people on coal and imported oil forever. You can't depend on foreign suppliers who might shut you off without warning. That's a recipe for weakness. That's how you stay subordinate. Subordination kills any nation that wants to lead globally. This deal is India's total rejection of that path. It's their declaration of energy independence. Nuclear plants don't just provide electricity, they provide certainty. They become the backbone of systems that can never fail. Imagine factories operating around the clock without power failures. Picture high-speed trains running on domestically generated electricity. Think about AI data centers and computing facilities across the country processing global information without worrying about blackouts. Visualize millions of electric vehicles on the roads, not as expensive options, but as normal transportation because the energy grid can handle the load. That's what nuclear capability creates. Here's what's truly shocking. France didn't see this coming. France, the country that built its reputation as the world's nuclear technology leader, the teacher, the expert, the one writing the playbook. For decades, they controlled the pace. But this deal caught them completely off guard because it flipped everything upside down. Instead of looking west for guidance, India looked forward into the future. Instead of begging for scraps, they bet everything. Instead of staying the customer, they positioned themselves as the next nuclear superpower. The world underestimates India because they focus on today's problems. They see pollution in cities, infrastructure gaps, uneven development. What they miss is the momentum. They miss the hunger. They miss what happens when over 1 billion people decide they won't settle for second best anymore. This deal is that momentum made real. And those $56 billion aren't just steel and concrete. They're the physical form of a will to dominate tomorrow. Here's the bigger picture. The future runs on electricity. Every disruptive technology, artificial intelligence, self-driving cars, vertical farming, space exploration, advanced manufacturing, quantum computing, all of them consume incredible amounts of energy. Fossil fuels can't keep pace. Renewables can't stabilize massive grids alone. Only nuclear can support the kind of exponential future we're building. This isn't about politics. This is about physics. And India is choosing physics over politics. This changes everything about how the world sees India. For decades, Western nations maintained their advantage by controlling energy technology access. Want nuclear power? Play by our rules, pay our prices, sign our agreements, accept our conditions. That power structure just died. This 56 billion deal is India saying we don't need your permission anymore. Once a nation crosses that mental barrier, once it decides to build its own energy future, everything else becomes inevitable. Look at history. Every modern superpower shared one thing in common: access to massive, scalable energy. Britain had coal. America had oil and gas. Russia turned pipelines into weapons. Now India is claiming its position with nuclear power. The game stays the same, only the players change. And this deal puts India on track to become one of the central powers of the next century. It's worth understanding the real impact inside India itself. People think about nuclear power in abstract terms: reactors, gigawatts, infrastructure projects, but let's make it concrete. A single nuclear plant powers millions of homes, schools, hospitals, and factories. Multiply that across a 56 billion investment, and you're talking about entire regions lighting up, industrial zones running non-stop, and rural areas jumping straight past fossil fuels to clean baseload power. This isn't gradual improvement, it's exponential growth. Think about the chain reactions. More reliable power means more factories. More factories create more jobs. More jobs generate higher incomes. Higher incomes drive stronger consumption. Stronger consumption fuels more businesses. And it all loops back because those businesses need more energy. Nuclear plants aren't just about electricity. They create self-reinforcing cycles of growth. This is why the West feels nervous, because once India establishes this type of cycle, it doesn't stop. You don't reverse it, you don't slow down momentum, you accelerate. That's why France is shocked, because the empire they built on nuclear leadership is cracking, and India isn't even apologizing for it. They're just moving forward at maximum speed. What's incredible is how unprepared everyone else is for this shift. They're still caught up in debates about climate goals, carbon trading, subsidies, and short-term politics. Meanwhile, India is making a 56 billion bet on the kind of infrastructure that will define the next 100 years. That's not short-term thinking, that's civilization-level planning. And it takes real courage to make that call. So what does this mean for the world? It means the center of gravity is shifting. Power won't come from who has the biggest economy on paper. It's going to come from who has the energy backbone to support exponential technologies. It means the West can no longer assume the future belongs to them by default. It means countries like India, who are willing to make the biggest bets, will leap ahead of those who play it safe. This 56 billion nuclear plant deal is India's way of saying we choose the future, we choose abundance, we choose independence, and that choice doesn't just lift India, it changes the balance of the entire planet. Because once India proves this model works and demonstrates that massive nuclear adoption is possible at this speed, other nations will follow. They'll realize they don't have to wait for permission either. And when that happens, the entire energy map of the world gets redrawn. That's why France is shocked. That's why the world is watching. And that's why history will remember this moment as the turning point where India stopped being a rising power and started being an unstoppable force. Power isn't just a concept, it's a currency. Every nation trades in it, every empire builds on it, every collapse happens when you lose it. Throughout history, the definition of power has evolved. Once it was land, then gold, then coal, then oil, and now it's energy at scale. Specifically, the kind of energy that doesn't just fuel cars and homes, but powers entire digital civilizations, industrial ecosystems, artificial intelligence networks, and interconnected supply chains spanning continents. That's what this 56 billion nuclear deal represents. It's not a contract, it's not a business transaction, it's a redistribution of global power. France is shocked not because of the dollar amount. 56 billion in the global economy is huge, but it's not world-ending by itself. The real shock comes from what that number means. For decades, France has built its identity around being the global leader in nuclear technology. They created their reputation as the country with the expertise, the scale, the ability to export nuclear solutions worldwide. France was the gatekeeper. Nations wanting nuclear capability often had to look to Paris for approval, for partnership, for engineering, for financing. That position gave France geopolitical influence that went far beyond energy. It gave them leverage in trade negotiations, influence in security agreements, a seat at every global table where energy was discussed. Now imagine watching that entire role, that entire identity suddenly being challenged, disrupted, and rewritten by a country you once thought of as a follower, not a leader. That's what this deal accomplished. It told the world the center of gravity is moving east, and once momentum shifts east, it doesn't go back. France is stunned because they realize their long-held monopoly of influence is under threat and there's no quick solution. This isn't something you can fix with a press release or a summit. This is structural change. Once a nation like India commits to building nuclear power at this unprecedented scale, the world recalibrates, allies recalibrate, rivals recalibrate, investors recalibrate, everyone recalibrates, and France is left wondering how they lost control of the narrative. To understand why this moment carries such weight, you need to grasp how global influence actually operates. Nations don't gain power by giving speeches. They gain it by controlling resources other nations need. When Britain controlled coal, it powered the Industrial Revolution and built an empire. When America controlled oil, it created global supply chains and military dominance. When Russia controlled gas pipelines, it dictated Europe's energy policy and political decisions. Energy is leverage. It's the invisible force behind treaties, conflicts, alliances, and rivalries. Whoever controls energy controls behavior. Whoever provides energy writes the rules. India's nuclear leap is about writing new rules. It's about telling the world that the future won't be dictated by old power centers in Washington, Paris, or London. It's going to be dictated by nations willing to take the boldest risks. This deal is exactly that kind of risk. A bet on sovereignty, on independence, on breaking free from the cycle of being told what to do by others. Why does this shift matter so much? Because nuclear energy isn't just another commodity. Oil can be blocked. Gas pipelines can be sabotaged. Solar and wind depend on weather conditions. But nuclear, once it's operational, it's nearly impossible to stop. It's steady, constant, industrial scale power that doesn't answer to external suppliers. That makes it the ultimate tool of independence. And that's why France feels this so deeply. They know that the moment India builds this capability at scale, India no longer has to look to them for anything. In fact, other nations may start looking to India instead. The gatekeeper becomes the competitor. The teacher becomes the rival. That's the shift happening right now. Think about the ripple effects. For decades, the West has maintained leverage over developing nations by controlling technology transfers, resource access, and financing. Nuclear technology was one of the most tightly controlled of all. It was the crown jewel. You couldn't just buy it without years of negotiation, oversight, and strings attached. India breaking through with a 56 billion investment signals that those days are ending. If India can break through, others will follow. The monopoly dissolves, the leverage disappears, and suddenly the West doesn't hold all the cards anymore. This terrifies established powers because their dominance isn't based on military strength alone. It's based on dependence. They built systems where nations have no choice but to rely on them. Take that away and the empire of influence crumbles. That's why this deal represents so much more than economics. It's a direct attack on the architecture of dependence. It's the birth of a new era where developing nations don't wait for handouts or conditions, but build their own foundations. India in this moment is doing something nations rarely accomplish. It's forcing a complete recalibration of global perception. Until now, India was seen as a growing market, a tech hub, a country of software engineers and call centers. Valuable, yes, rising, yes, but not rewriting the rules of the game. This deal says otherwise. It says India is not just a market to be sold to. It's a power to be feared and respected, a power that will shape the global order, not just participate in it. And let's not ignore the psychology behind this. France is shocked because it reveals something they weren't prepared to face, that their monopoly was fragile all along. They thought their dominance was unshakable. But it only took one bold move, one deal, one act of courage from another nation to expose the illusion. That's how all empires fall. They appear invincible until suddenly they're not. And the collapse doesn't come from gradual erosion. It comes from a single disruptive shift that exposes their weakness. India has just exposed France's weakness. It has shown that influence built on monopoly is always temporary because sooner or later someone becomes bold enough to bypass it entirely. The real power doesn't belong to the one who guards the gates. It belongs to the one who decides the gates don't matter anymore. That's what this deal symbolizes. India is building its own entrance into the future without asking France to hold the key. Now, let's take this even further. Geopolitical influence operates like gravity. The more mass you have in terms of energy, economy, technology, the more you pull others into your orbit. Right now, nations are watching India very carefully. If this deal succeeds, if the reactors get built, if the power output is stable, the message will be deafening. India is not just another rising power, it's the rising power. And when that message lands, countries across Asia, Africa, Latin America will pivot. They'll start to see India as a partner, an alternative, a counterweight to the West. That changes alliances, that changes trade flows, that changes the map of the world. This is why France is rattled. They know influence isn't lost in a day, but it is lost in moments like this, moments that trigger shifts in perception. For decades, when countries thought nuclear, they thought France. Now they'll start to think India. That is how soft power is built. That is how geopolitical currency is created, not through speeches, but through monumental action. And here's the brutal truth. The world respects results, not excuses. France can talk about its legacy, its expertise, its role in nuclear history, but India will show results. India will show reactors, megawatts, thriving industries, and energy independence. And when the results are visible, influence shifts naturally. Nations align with strength, not nostalgia. There's also an element of timing here that makes this even more significant. The global system is unstable right now. Supply chains are fragile. Energy crises erupt at the slightest disruption. Wars are fought not only with weapons, but with oil barrels and gas valves. In this unstable system, nations are desperate for stability, for reliable partners. If India positions itself as that reliable partner, its geopolitical influence skyrockets overnight. France knows this. That's why the shock is so intense. They see the writing on the wall that the leadership baton is being passed, not voluntarily, but through sheer force of momentum. This deal is the kind of move that will be studied decades from now. Analysts will look back and say this was the moment when India stopped being an emerging market and started being a geopolitical architect. This was the moment when the old order realized its monopoly was broken. This was the moment the East started writing its own rules. And here's the ultimate irony. The shock France feels today is just the beginning. Because once India proves this model works, once the world sees the reactors come online, the shock waves will spread far beyond Paris. Washington will feel it. London will feel it. Brussels will feel it. Because the West as a whole has built its dominance on the assumption that leadership is theirs by birthright. This deal proves that assumption is dead. Leadership now belongs to whoever dares to seize it. India has dared. France is shocked. The world is adjusting. And the future just tilted eastward with nuclear power as the lever and courage as the fulcrum. This 56 billion nuclear deal is more than a contract. It's a shock wave, a reset button, a wake-up call. France is stunned. The world is paying attention. And India is quietly building the foundation for a future where it doesn't just participate in the global economy, it leads it. The lesson is simple. Bold moves define the future. Hesitation builds nothing. Energy is power, and the nations that dare to secure it at scale will own the next century. India just made that bet, and the world will never be the same.